December 7th, 1941. An aerial strike force gathers and executes a surprise attack on the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. Its aim, to bring a nation to its knees. Thousands die in one of the most devastating defeats in military history. Now, by examining events leading up to the attack and analyzing previously classified military records, a Japanese intelligence expert discovers why the raid was such a total disaster for the Empire of Japan. Disasters don't just happen. They are triggered by a chain of critical events. Unravel the fateful decisions in those final seconds from disaster. (4 a.m.) The Sea of Japan, 6,500 kilometers from Pearl Harbor. For Japan's strategic mastermind, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, today is the culmination of years of research and planning. The attack on Pearl Harbor will be the first blow in a wave of attacks across the Pacific as Japan seeks to carve out an empire. Now, the planning is over, and the storm is about to break. Aircraft carrier Hiryu, Central Pacific. Putting the plan into action is down to Japanese naval aviators like Takeo Shiro.
First thing in the morning, I woke up and went up onto the flight deck. There was maybe 50% cloud cover, so I thought this will be okay. We'll be able to attack.
As the observer on a Type 97 carrier attack bomber, he'll be in the first wave of the attack that plunges his nation into war.
I thought it would be one hell of a day. If Japan provoked or started a war, it would probably last for a very long time, and we might die here today. I thought it would be terribly serious for the country.
The Japanese air crews who will spearhead the attack are under no illusions about the scale of the task that faces them.
We were prepared to die in battle. We were told to write a farewell note home to our parents, with some of our hair and nails as mementos. So we cut our hair and nails and wrapped them up with the farewell message, so that if we did die, they could be delivered home.
6:30 a.m. Battleship Row, Pearl Harbor. Deep in the armored belly of the battleship USS Arizona, Don Stratton starts the day like any other Sunday with the ship in port.
One Sunday morning was just a clean sweep down. Sunday was just kind of a leisure day for everybody.
Everyone on the warship is running to a...
I did have some extra oranges on the chow table, and I was going to take them down to sick bay to a buddy of mine.
Moored at the east side of the anchorage is the heavy cruiser USS San Francisco. Marine Private Mal Middlesworth is one of the skeleton crew manning the ship while it waits for repairs. Duties are light, and the crew makes plans for their shore leave.
There's a lot of conversation. What you did on last Liberty, what you're going to do on this Liberty, what time you're coming back. You might talk about some mail that you gotten home.
370 kilometers out to sea, the storm is gathering. This captured Japanese film shows the final moments as the massive strike force of 180 bombers and fighters gets underway.
The fighters were on the leading edge, then carrier dive bombers, then carrier attack bombers at different heights, with horizontal formations too. We flew around above the task force, getting into position. And then, when we were all in formation, we set off.
7:02, Opana Point, Hawaii. At a newly installed radar site in the far northwest of Oahu, novice operators George Elliott and Joseph Lockhart have something unexpected on their screens. The radar shows more aircraft than they've ever seen heading inland at high speed. Their report comes to Army Lieutenant Kermit A. Tyler. He's expecting a flight of B-17 bombers from the mainland. But the bombers of the 38th Recon Squadron are still hundreds of kilometers away. The planes on the radar scope are an aerial armada, the first wave of the strike force for the most powerful carrier fleet ever assembled. And the 84,000 servicemen on the island of Oahu have no idea what's about to hit them. The first wave of Japanese bombers flies south across Oahu, completely unopposed. For Takeo Shiro, it seems more like a training flight than war.
In training, we used a large model of the whole island, with mountains, cane fields. So on the mission, it was as if I saw that model. When I flew over the mountains and cane fields en route, it felt like somewhere I'd been or seen before.
Only when the first wave of Japanese planes arrives over Honolulu can they be sure that they've achieved total surprise.
Seen from above, I felt it was just a quiet, pretty town.
Realizing they've caught the Americans off guard, the Japanese break radio silence to signal the aircraft carrier Hiryu with the prearranged code words Toro, 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 meaning tiger, 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 or attack, attack, attack. From this moment, every plane in the aerial armada is supposed to follow a carefully orchestrated attack plan.
If we achieved a surprise attack, Plan A was for the torpedo bombers to go in first, with the carrier dive bombers afterwards. If the enemy saw us coming and was fighting back, Plan B was for the carrier dive bombers to attack first, and our aerial torpedoes would go in last of all.
But when the attack leader fires a single flare to signal that they should execute Plan A, many pilots don't see it. When a second flare is fired, pilots who saw the first one think they're going for Plan B. In the confusion, the entire fleet attacks at once.
We descended. We'd been flying between 3,000 and 3,500 meters since leaving the aircraft carrier until we dispersed, until we had the order to attack. Then we were told, all units attack. So in we went.
7:58 a.m. The sailors at Pearl Harbor are following the usual relaxed Sunday morning routine.
It's a beautiful, typical Hawaiian day, sun shining. I had the 8 to 12 watch, and on that watch, you go out and make colors. That means you raise the flag on the fantail or the back portion of the ship.
Sweeping in from the north, the torpedo bombers spearhead the Japanese attack.
There were no aircraft carriers, but several battleships lined up. I think we attacked the one that was on the outside, two from the front, the West Virginia.
As navigator and bombardier, Takeo Shiro is responsible for releasing the torpedo at exactly the right point.
Pearl Harbor is quite shallow. It's only around 12 to 13 meters, so it was vital that the torpedoes did not just bury themselves in the harbor mud. And that's why we released at a low altitude. Lieutenant Matsumura was in front of me, and he told me exactly when to drop it, saying, "Ready? Fire!" And I pulled it immediately. One quick movement. We realized from the wake that it was running beautifully.
The attack is underway before the American sailors know what's hit them. In the depths of the USS Arizona, Don Stratton never gets the chance to see his buddy in sickbay. When the explosions begin, he rushes to his duty post. It's the start of a battle that'll see thousands of sailors like him fighting for their lives. A.m. At Pearl Harbor, the peaceful Hawaiian Sunday morning is shattered by a devastating aerial bombardment. The onslaught catches U.S. servicemen like Mal Middlesworth completely off guard.
I heard this horrible explosions. I thought, my God, what are they doing on Sunday? It's obviously a drill, but it looks very realistic.
Together with more than 1,000 other sailors on the USS Arizona, Don Stratton is plunged into the fight of his life.
I went down on the forecastle and the sailors were pointing and hollering and pointing toward Ford Island, and looked over there and we could see the bombs landing and the planes banked, and we could see the red sunrise on the planes, and we knew right away it was the Japanese.
From the deck of the heavy cruiser USS San Francisco, Mal has a grandstand view of the attack.
They're coming in to the right of me, so I can see the whole plane. I see it 30 to 40 feet away.
One of the planes he's looking at is Takeo Shiro's B-5N Kate torpedo bomber.
After firing the torpedo, we passed over the West Virginia's mast, high above their bridge. When I looked, the sailors on the West Virginia below me were running across the deck, trying hard to climb up to the bridge. While some were running, others were also diving in.
The sailors and Marines on the American battleships quickly overcome their shock. But vital seconds pass before the Americans can muster any sort of meaningful defense.
When we seen them bombing the Fort Island, we knew something was going on, and we know the ships were going to get bombed, and they headed right for my battle station.
Don Stratton's job is to feed information to the anti-aircraft gunners on the port side of the USS Arizona.
That's up about 5 ladders to get to up there to the sky control platform, they call it.
But the other side of Pearl Harbor's main anchorage, Mal Middlesworth is stuck on a ship with no fuel and no ammo.
There wasn't anything that I could do to respond to the situation. When you have the watch, the Marine has a .45 caliber pistol. I think the helplessness was one of the major feelings that you had. What can I do? How can I help? How can we get out of this mess? There was nothing we could do at the time.
8:02. While Mal Middlesworth watches helplessly, Don Stratton manages to bring some fight to the Japanese.
Speed 230.
We were doing some good, and I think the Japanese were very surprised that we were firing at them that quick.
But the odds are stacked against the defenders, and after just a few minutes, they're running out of ammunition.
We had 50 rounds of ammunition behind every gun, and we had to break some of the locks to get at the magazines and get the shells, but we fired all of those, and our gunnery officer went down to get some more.
In spite of their often heroic efforts, the sailors struggle to cope with the combined aerial assault of low-level torpedo bombers, dive bombers, and high-altitude bombers.
We were firing at the high-altitude bombers and the dive bombers that were coming in. We couldn't set our fuse for that altitude. All the bursts were very short. They were higher than we could get to them.
To provide some record of the attack for the Japanese High Command, Shiro's pilot, Lieutenant Matsumara, climbs, then turns to allow him to take photographs. The shot becomes one of the most famous images of the attack on Pearl Harbor.
It was total devastation. I mean, it was unbelievable. Beyond anything I'd ever seen or anybody would ever think about.
On board the Arizona, Don Stratton is miraculously still alive, but only just.
My face was burnt, and I lost part of my ear, and my back was burnt. My T-shirt caught on fire, and this side is pretty well burned up.
And everyone else on the ship is either dead or too badly hurt to help. The fire is raging. The only hope of survival is to get off the ship and get onto the neighboring repair ship, USS Vestal. But they're 18 meters above the water, and the sea is aflame with burning oil.
We seen a sailor on the Vestal, and we got his attention, and he throwed us a heaving line. We pulled that across. We tied that onto the Arizona.
With burns covering 65% of his body, Don Stratton is in excruciating pain. But there's no one to help. If he wants to live, he has to get himself out of there. His skin is badly burned, and gripping the rope is hard.
When we started to cross the line, it just took the skin off my arms. It's like we would take off a sock. We proceeded to crawl across the line hand over hand to the Vestal, which were probably about 70 feet across and about 45 feet in the air.
Even while ships are sinking all around them, the soldiers and sailors defending Pearl Harbor fight back with all they've got. 8:30 a.m. As suddenly as it began, the onslaught stops.
Once the first attack was finished, you didn't know what to expect. There were rumors that the Japanese were landing on the North Shore. So nobody really knew what was going on. Nobody knew if there was going to be a second or a third attack. But we had that interval to get weapons and ammunition.
The U.S. Army has been caught hopelessly off guard. They use the precious minutes to get a few fighters into the air. And the Japanese have not yet finished their assault. 8:50. 20 to 30 minutes after the first wave of bombers hit, another 170 aircraft strike, hammering the targets already hit by the first wave. The other main targets are the airfields, which are subjected to furious strafing and bombing attacks throughout the morning. Because of fears of sabotage, the U.S. Army's planes are gathered together to make them easier to guard. But that also makes them easy targets for the Japanese. Over 180 U.S. aircraft are destroyed, with more damaged. In total, 4 American battleships are sunk, 4 damaged, and 13 more major ships destroyed or seriously damaged. In return, the Japanese have lost just 29 planes. For the Japanese air crews, the attack looks like a total triumph.
We'd been able to strike a blow at the very start of this war. So as soldiers, it was a matter of great pride. We were very happy.
When the Japanese pilots return to their carriers, they receive a hero's welcome.
All of the lads in our torpedo bomber squadron from Hiryu managed to return safely. When we got back, sailors on the ship greeted us with cheers of Banzai.
For Takeo Shiro, relief is the overwhelming emotion.
Because we'd managed to achieve a surprise attack, I felt somehow that my life had been saved.
With their mission complete, the air crews are allowed a few minutes to take in their accomplishment.
The captain had the whole crew assembled and voiced his appreciation, saying, "Thank you for your hard work."
For the Japanese air crews, the attack is a total triumph. 3 p.m. As soon as the aircraft are recovered and stowed for transit, the commander of the carrier strike force, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, orders the withdrawal. The performance of the Imperial Japanese Navy has exceeded all expectations. The attack has sunk more ships, and losses have been lower than in even the most optimistic Japanese predictions. But even so, it has in fact totally failed. The Sea of Japan, 6,500 kilometers from Pearl Harbor. Amidst all the joy of a successful attack, all the congratulation, one man is not swept away by the excitement of victory. The mastermind behind the mission, Isoroku Yamamoto, can see what others can't. Far from being a triumph for Japan, the attack is an utter disaster. Now, 70 years later, we use previously classified military records to rewind events and investigate every aspect of the attack, to reveal why and how this painstakingly planned operation went wrong. Japanese intelligence expert Tosh Minohara will uncover a series of miscalculations by the Japanese military that led to disaster on a scale that totally changes the course of the nation's history. January 1941, 11 months before the attack on Pearl Harbor. The operation is conceived as part of a bigger Japanese plan to build a Southeast Asian empire spanning China, the East Indies, and Malaya.
The Japanese Army's plan in the South was to secure Japanese resources, war-making resources. There were a lot of strategic materials down there, rubber being one, tin, and oil, of course, were very important.
Japan's master strategist, Admiral Yamamoto, knows this plan will bring conflict with the Western powers. And he sees the US fleet at Pearl as the biggest threat to the High Command's plans.
The American Navy could wreak havoc upon Japan's supply lines. The oceans are of paramount importance. Therefore, controlling the sea lanes means controlling the lifeblood of Japan.
So Yamamoto plans a sucker punch. A preemptive strike to take the fight out of America and eliminate its capacity to intervene in the Pacific.
The Japanese believed that perhaps the attack on Pearl Harbor would be such a devastating blow upon the Americans that the Americans would lose the will to fight.
Yamamoto plans the attack on Pearl Harbor to be a crippling blow for the US Navy. But our investigation shows how key errors in the tactical planning and the operational control of the attack turn it from triumph to disaster. Admiral Yamamoto knows that aircraft carriers will play a critical role in the war to come, and the American aircraft carriers based at Pearl Harbor are priority targets in his attack plan. Throughout the build-up to the attack, the Japanese task force receives regular intelligence about the US ships at Pearl. December the 1st, 1941. 6 days before the attack, they're still uncertain about the disposition of the American carriers when they receive the coded message, "Climb Mount Niitaka," ordering them to proceed. Just hours before the attack is due to start, the task force receives a critical update.
The Japanese received intelligence more than 6 hours before the attack that there were no carriers. But they also knew that the Americans were not prepared for this attack.
Fortunately for the Americans, the aircraft carriers are not in Pearl Harbor at the time.
When the attack hits, the carriers Enterprise and Lexington are at sea, delivering planes for Marine Corps fighter squadrons. And the USS Saratoga is on its way to San Diego for repairs. Commander of the strike force, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, faces a decision. Take advantage of the element of surprise and attack, knowing that he'll miss some important targets. Or take a unilateral decision to call off the attack. Yamamoto's preoccupation with eliminating the US Navy's carriers is not shared by Nagumo, who's making the critical decisions in the field.
Had Yamamoto given him a choice to choose his fleet commander, it most likely would not have been Admiral Nagumo.
But Yamamoto is unable to choose the best man for the job of leading the task force, because his hands are tied by the traditions of the Imperial Japanese Navy.
The Japanese Navy functioned like a bureaucracy. He could not skip over someone of Nagumo's rank for a junior officer. It was that the pecking order was there. It was Nagumo.
And with Nagumo in charge, there's just one priority for the Japanese attack.
The most important Japanese priority during this attack are the battleships. They want to knock out as many ships as possible.
Because of Nagumo's preoccupation with the battleships, the attack is launched, even though there's no chance of hitting the US Navy's vital aircraft carriers. It's a critical mistake. But even without hitting the carriers, the attack on Pearl Harbor could still have struck crippling blows on the US Navy, if it had hit the right targets. Because of fundamental flaws in the Japanese Navy's martial mindset, critical facilities like Pearl Harbor's ship repair yards are ignored.
Soft targets were considered to be, from a Navy point of view, unfair. They were concerned about this. And as a Navy person, you went after the big ships. And the big threat were the American battleships. The shipyards and so forth would support American war effort, but would not be a direct threat towards Japan. It's the ship, it's the actual heart.
Disasters don't just happen. They are triggered by a chain of critical events. Unravel the fateful decisions in those final seconds from disaster. "4 a.m. The Sea of Japan, 6,500 kilometers from Pearl Harbor. For Japan's strategic mastermind, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, today is the culmination of years of research and planning.
Cover. So I thought this will be okay. We'll be able to attack.
As the observer on a Type 97 carrier attack bomber, he'll be in the first wave of the attack that plunges his nation into war.
I thought it would be one hell of a day. If Japan provoked or started a war, it would probably last for a very long time, and we might die here today. I thought it would be terribly serious for the country.
The Japanese air crews who will spearhead the attack are under no illusions about the scale of the task that faces them. December 7th, 1941. An aerial strike force gathers and executes a surprise attack on the US Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. Its aim, to bring a nation to its knees. Thousands die in one of the most devastating defeats in military history. Now, by examining events leading up to the attack and analyzing previously classified military records, a Japanese intelligence expert discovers why the raid was such a total disaster for the Empire of Japan.
We were prepared to die in battle. We were told to write a farewell note home to our parents, with some of our hair and nails as mementos. So we cut our hair and nails and wrapped them up with the farewell message, so that if we did die, they could be delivered home.
6:30 a.m. Battleship Row, Pearl Harbor. Deep in the armored belly of the battleship USS Arizona, Don Stratton starts the day like any other Sunday with the ship in port.
One Sunday morning was just a clean sweep down. Sunday was just kind of a leisure day for everybody.
Everyone on the warship is running to a... The attack on Pearl Harbor will be the first blow in a wave of attacks across the Pacific as Japan seeks to carve out an empire. Now, the planning is over, and the storm is about to break. Aircraft carrier Hiryu, Central Pacific. Putting the plan into action is down to Japanese naval aviators like Takeo Shiro.
First thing in the morning, I woke up and went up onto the flight deck. There was maybe 50% cloud.